The Chicago Bears are starting mandatory minicamp, and that means the pressure is on for a handful of players who need to step up.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Quick programming note, though, as we get into this June month and for the little bit of July, we'll be down to just 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week, especially once minicamp and OTAs wrap up here. It's the slow part of the offseason, so we slow down a little bit too, but we'll be ramped back up to a full 5 days a week once training camp comes back around into full swing. And on the show today, I want to go through a little bit of a minicamp preview here, looking at the players that really need to step up this time of year, players that the Bears are going to be counting on in important roles that we just need to see more of this season, players who have some kind of competition for their starting role, some pressure to step up and make sure they're not losing their jobs, and also some key backups that have some new battles. All of a sudden, some younger guys on the roster feeling the heat that maybe they're not at risk of getting cut right away, but fading into, obscurity and eventually flaming out as Chicago Bears. It starts by defending their role right now. But I think for me, the big position group, and then we'll get into some specific players within that needs to step up, that the pressure is on to start performing and showing this Bears front office and coaching staff that the guys currently under contract can get the job done, is the defensive line. And I think, pass rush in particular here. There's a decent level of confidence in their ability to stop the run with some of the big bodies that Dennis Allen has put up front. But this defensive line as a whole needs to step up. And I start with Dayo Odeyingbo, the free agent signing from the Indianapolis Colts. The Bears need Odeyingbo to emerge as, not just a fine starting caliber defensive end, but like a playmaker, somewhat of a difference maker on this defensive line, because they're paying him like he needs to be a difference maker on this defensive line. His contract is a little bit backloaded, so it's not like that he's costing them a ton this year, but averaging $16 million a year on his deal puts him among the top 25 highest paid edge rushers in football, and they need him to play like a top 25 edge rusher in football. He only had 3 sacks last season with the Indianapolis Colts. He's had 16 over the course of his career. Like they signed him with the intention of him continuing to get better with his best football still in front of him. And so we need to start seeing that, because they don't have a ton of depth at the defensive end position in particular, among the edge rushers. And so that means the starters are going to have to be very productive, consistent players. And they'll occasionally get some breaks rotating other guys in there, but they need Montez Sweat and Odeyingbo to be great. And we've seen Montez Sweat be great before. He's coming off of a down year, and yes, he needs to be better and also needs to step up in some of his own way. But like Odeyingbo, I want to see him come into OTAs and minicamp and look like a prized free agent addition. Obviously, they're not going to be in full pads, so you're not going to get the full experience of what a pass rusher is going to look like. But and really, even when they put pads on in practice, right, you can only tell so much because they can't hit the quarterback and they can't actually get all the way home with it. So there's limitations to how much pass rushers can truly shine. But you want to see that explosiveness, that strength, that pass rushing repertoire. You want to see like all the signs of a top flight pass rusher to pair with Montez Sweat that pays off as a free agent signing there. Along the same veins, the other big defensive lineman for me that needs to step up is Austin Booker. Because right now you look at this Bears defensive line and he's the number 3 pass rusher behind Sweat and Odeyingbo. They could still go out and sign a veteran free agent to add some more depth at that position, because they don't have much besides Booker and then, Dominic Robinson, Daniel Hardy, although Hardy is getting some work at linebacker now instead of defensive end, so he may come off of this depth chart and really kind of just be Booker and Robinson. It feels like the Bears need to add one more pass rusher into this rotation. But if somebody like Austin Booker, you could throw Dominic Robinson in this conversation, but I think we have more confidence in Booker at this point. If someone like Austin Booker can step up and take a big year 2 jump, then maybe the Bears can have a lot more confidence in the rotation as it exists now and not feel as much urgency to go out and add a pass rusher. I mean, Booker only had 1.5 sacks as a rookie, but as a 5th-round pick coming out of Kansas, there's going to be a developmental curve there, a little bit more of a raw prospect in some regards. So we can't necessarily expect Booker to step up and be, this dominant number 3 pass rusher right away in year 2. But you can hope for some real progress. And really, minicamp and OTAs is his opportunity to show the team, hey, you don't need a veteran. I'm good enough. I can handle the job. And again, that's hard because of the lack of pads. But if you can kind of show all the foundational aspects of it, you can kind of hold off having more competition come in and potentially take playing time away from you. If the Bears go out and want to bring in a free agent, I look at somebody like Zadarius Smith, I think was a veteran that would make a lot of sense with some familiarity with Ben Johnson and that kind of right age, right role, right cost combination that makes sense for Chicago. Also, like John Kaminsky from the Lions or Jalen Reeves-Maybin from the Lions could be an opportunity there. Tino Passanio from the Saints. There's a few different names out here that the Bears could consider if Booker and Dominic Robinson or Dango Dingbo, if these defensive ends don't look like they can fully handle all of this playing time and all of this responsibility on their own right now, that's the difference between the Bears signing somebody and them not signing somebody. I'd also throw in, on the interior, I do want to see Gervon Dexter continue to step up and make strides. I mean, he took a big jump from year 1 to year 2, so I don't know that there's a concern left about that position. But hey, when they bring in Grady Jarrett and they still have Andrew Billings coming back as 2 veteran starters in the NFL, they're going to be counting on Dexter to be a key pass rusher on the interior, and those guys are going to be fighting for his playing time as well. So he has to continue to get better and to step up there and to provide that interior pass rush to then support the edge rusher position where there isn't as much depth and isn't as much proven production as you've gotten with some of the guys on the interior that the Bears seem to have preferred to load up on, or just has been easier for them to load up on between Grady Jarrett and Shamar Turner then in the draft, as opposed to Odengbo really being the only addition at the edge rusher position, while subtracting Darrell Taylor and DeMarcus Walker. They haven't really fully replaced those guys. So as they try and step up at OTAs and minicamp, that could give us a lot of answers about the defensive line, or it can point us in the direction of more work needing to be done on the defensive line. And it just feels like it's been 3 or 4 years in a row now where in the lead up to training camp, we keep asking ourselves, are the Bears going to sign Yannick Ngakoue for the 13th time, right? I mean, I know they only signed him once and he's already under contract with somebody else. So it's not Yannick Ngakoue anymore, but the last 2 off seasons in a row, we talk about the Bears needing a pass rusher heading into training camp. And I think actually Yannick Ngakoue might actually be available because I think he kind of flamed out a bit at the end of last season. Nonetheless, Ngakoue is not really going to be in the conversation here, but it's one of these other pass rushers. We're always talking about getting a new pass rusher entering training camp, and it'd be nice to get to one of these off seasons where that's not still a question mark at the same time of year, but alas, we got at least one more of those in front of us here heading through the rest of the summer. But hey, pass rush isn't the only position group that's going to be under the microscope here. There's a few spots where there's real competition for starting roles, and the guys involved, they're going to need to step up or risk losing out to the players behind them trying to compete for their job. So we'll take a look at a couple of different spots on both sides of the ball next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in, because when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. What makes LinkedIn such a great place to hire is it's full of all the top qualified candidates. I'm on LinkedIn. I bet you're on LinkedIn. And if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all part of the LinkedIn community. But we might not all be actively looking for jobs. But if your role was put in front of the right person, maybe they'd consider it, even if they weren't trying to go out of their way to find one. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The pass rush needs to step up and get better, but we kind of know generally what the defensive line rotation is going to look like at this point. There's not really a starting job up for grabs. There's sort of like backup playing time as far as who's going to get more snaps off the bench, but for the most part, we kind of know what that position group looks like. But there's a few other spots on this roster where guys are directly battling for their starting role, and OTAs and minicamp is the time to step up and separate yourself so that when you get into training camp with the pads on, you are the clear front runner and you can maintain that lead when practice really starts to get serious. We'll start with the left tackle position, where Braxton Jones doesn't get to be part of this yet, as he's still recovering from ankle surgery from the injury he suffered late at the end of last offseason. So Braxton Jones not expected back until training camp. So it will continue to be rookie second-round pick Ozzie Trapillo versus second-year former third-round pick Karan Amagaji. Through rookie minicamp, or sort of through, I guess, rookie minicamp, and then I should say more voluntary OTAs prior to this mandatory minicamp starting, the Bears were going back and forth with two of them. So sometimes it would be Ozzie with the starters, sometimes it would be Amagaji with the starters, giving them both plenty of opportunities to succeed there. And I imagine we'll see a lot of that back and forth continue through the summer. Now, I don't know whether that's one day Ozzie, one day Amagaji, or like 1 week Ozzie, 1 week Amagaji, although this mandatory minicamp I think is only like 3 days. So I imagine it'll be sort of a 1-2-1 combination there. But who gets the 1 and who gets the 2 there, right? If it's an odd number of practices and you're alternating, someone's going to get more than the other. And I'm curious to find out if it's going to be Trapillo, who's like in the early lead there, or Karan Amagaji, who's more of the incumbent, who's been here longer, who's been in the NFL longer. Although both have about the same relationship with the coaching staff, so that's not necessarily an advantage for Amagaji or either one. Either way, I will say, I keep coming back to what we saw in the Bears documentary video from the draft, their 1920 football drive documentary that they put out on the Bears YouTube channel, where when they drafted Ozzie Trapillo, assistant general manager Ian Cunningham was celebrating and says, "We got our offensive line." I think there's a feeling, an expectation, a hope from the front office that at some point Ozzie Trapillo will be the starting left tackle. Whether that's right now in mandatory minicamp, whether that's the start of training camp, whether that's week 1, or whether that's 2026, we'll see when. But I think the feeling was like, this is the draft pick that is supposed to complete the offensive line overhaul with Joe Thuney and Drew Dahlman and Jonah Jackson, along with the return of Darnell Wright at right tackle. So I think there's going to be some institutional support for Trapillo to be that starter, but he's got to earn it. And they're not just going to hand it to him, especially when you've got Amagaji as a recent draft pick. And then, of course, Braxton Jones when he comes back from injury. But like, both Trapillo and Amagaji need to step up, because no matter who is winning the competition right now, the whole deal changes when Braxton Jones gets back, and he'll be kind of the incumbent favorite to start, regardless of whether Trapillo or Amagaji has been performing better at OTAs and minicamp. They also don't have pads on, so it's hard to fully judge how they're performing, and I think it's tricky to have an offensive line battle at this stage of the process, so I don't know that we'll get some definitive answer coming out of rookie minicamp, but at least it's a step in the right direction, and it's more opportunities for these guys to be able to show what they can do. Another player who is a starter and, he's got competition. Maybe it's not as direct as we think about the left tackle position, but I think Tyreek Stevenson needs to step up at Bears minicamp and OTAs here, but especially mandatory minicamp here, where he was drafted by Matt Eberflus and was part of the previous regime. He was already kind of in the doghouse from the previous regime, given the everything that happened with the Washington Commanders game, et cetera, and he was rotating during last season with Terrell Smith, and Terrell Smith is still here. Those guys, I mean, it's a competition for the starting job. I think we all expect that Stevenson will retain his starting role, and that how real of a competition is it? I mean, I think it's I think it's genuine, but I guess the question is, how likely is it that Terrell Smith fully overtakes him to be the starter? Probably unlikely. A 5th-round pick from 2 years ago beating out a 2nd-round pick from 2 years ago, but draft status doesn't necessarily determine anything for certain. And, there's 5th-round rookie Zay Frazier that your new defensive backs coach Al Harris really, really likes. Again, I wouldn't expect a 1-year starter in college as a 5th-round pick to come in and win a starting job right away as a rookie. Like, this is Stevenson's job to lose for sure, but it's not like he was standing on any kind of firm ground going into this process. And so he needs to step up and buy in and lock in and show that he's the kind of fit in this defense that we think he can be, because Dennis Allen's defense is going to ask these corners to be a little bit more physical up at the line of scrimmage, play more press coverage, play more man coverage. And those are all things that should benefit Stevenson and put him in a better position to succeed even than what Eberflus's defense was asking him to do. And so by all accounts, Stevenson should be fine, but he has to step up and take it seriously and feel that pressure and understand that if Stevenson, isn't locked in and dialed in and stepping up, that guys like Terrell Smith or Zay Frazier or whoever are right there to take that playing time, and that this Bears coaching staff will absolutely give it to the player that earns it and deserves it the most, and doesn't have the allegiance to Stevenson of like, well, we drafted him in the 2nd round, so we got to make sure we give him every opportunity. It's like, no, those last coaches drafted him in the 2nd round. We didn't. We're just going to play the best player, the player who gives us the best chance to succeed. And there's been talk about potentially having Kyler Gordon play outside cornerback some, that Dennis Allen is kind of having him learn that role. Safety has also been in the conversation for Kyler Gordon, which is another topic I think we're going to have to come back to at some point this offseason as far as what that might look like in this Bears defense. But I think there's some real pressure on Stevenson to not screw this up. And then we'll throw in players that need to step up the other linebacker role. Next to TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, that number 3 linebacker battle to replace Jack Sanborn. You've got Noah Sewell as sort of the incumbent who's been here for 2 or 3 seasons, 2 seasons now, as a 5th-round pick back in 2023, but hasn't really played much on defense, pretty much a pure special teams guy up to this point. But then they draft Ruben Hippolyte in the 4th round, a player that Ryan Poles is very confident, that Dennis Allen seemed to really like. They wanted more speed in this defense, so will it be the rookie who felt like he was a reach and a little bit overdrafted at the time? Or will it be, the former 5th-round pick who's been developing but hasn't really taken that step forward and doesn't have the kind of speed that Dennis Allen's been looking for? But he's kind of been the incumbent. He got the first crack at it here, but I think Hippolyte has an opportunity to emerge as a potential starter as a rookie, as that number 3 linebacker. That's still going to be primarily a special teams role and only going to play in base defense. And Dennis Allen doesn't use a ton of base defense, but it is a real battle. It is a real, technically like a starting role type of position, a significant one on this Bears defense that's up for grabs here. And whoever steps up now is going to really put themselves ahead entering training camp to be that number 3 linebacker for the Chicago Bears. Those to me represent the starters that are in these key battles that have this pressure that need to step up at this stage of the game. But there's also some important backups here that maybe weren't necessarily expecting to have as much competition as they have right now. And we've liked what we've seen from them, and we think they can still be productive players in this Bears team. But there's a new sheriff in town. There's some new competition in town, and they're going to have to earn their spot this year, just like anybody else on the roster. So we'll look at some recent draft picks / young Bears players that all of a sudden are feeling a bit more pressure now than they were before. Next on Locked On Bears. The starters obviously deserve the most attention here, but we've seen a few Bears backups now, but backups that we know, backups that we care about, backups that play key roles, now facing even more competition and pressure with a need to step up right now at OTAs or Minicamp, or else they're going to find themselves way behind when it comes to training camp, and it becomes that much harder to dig themselves out of. How about running back Roschon Johnson as a start to begin here? That, when they draft Kyle Monangai in the 7th round, sure, a 7th round rookie doesn't necessarily mean Roschon Johnson's job is done for here, but I'm a big fan of Kyle Monangai. I think he was better than a 7th round quality player in this draft, and someone who I think can have a real rotational role in this Bears offense this season as a rookie. So right away, you've got Monangai already there, breathing down Roschon Johnson's neck, trying to take carries and snaps away from him behind DeAndre Swift. But you add out on top of that this broader desire to potentially upgrade the running back position more. I think this is more from the fan base than the team itself in terms of, whether it's the Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins free agent speculation, or whether it's trade speculation for the likes of, Breece Hall from the Jets or Kenneth Walker from the Seahawks. We talked on yesterday's podcast about how I think the most realistic running back trade option would actually be Antonio Gibson from the New England Patriots. Go back and take a listen to that podcast if you haven't heard that one yet. We talked about trade rumors for the Chicago Bears. But nonetheless, I think, first of all, the Bears are not going to add a running back until at least minicamp and OTAs are over. Like training camp at the earliest is when we would see another running back come in. So then Roschon Johnson and Kyle Monangai, but Roschon especially has the opportunity now to step up and show this Bears regime, hey, I got this. I'm a more than capable number 2 running back. Monangai can be the number 3, or you can compete with Travis Homer or whatever that looks like. But like Roschon can now, even without pads on, show the kind of, blocking ability, pass catching ability, decisiveness as a runner. You can't necessarily show your physicality as much when no one's actually like tackling you. It's not full contact, but to just kind of show that, hey, you can run this scheme at a high level. You can pick things up quickly, and you are a more than capable number 2 running back. I think the pressure's on Roschon even more than like somebody like DeAndre Swift, who again, like the trade rumors could affect him too. But like DeAndre Swift is getting $8 million for the Chicago Bears this year. Like even if they trade for a running back, Swift is still gonna be a part of this offense. Like he's not going anywhere. Whereas like Roschon Johnson has a more realistic path to being a healthy scratch, for example. Like they're not gonna cut him, of course, at this stage of career, but like DeAndre Swift isn't gonna be a healthy scratch. He's not gonna be inactive on game days because of his talent, but also how much he's getting paid and his expected role in this offense. But somebody like Roschon Johnson could find himself a healthy scratch behind Monangai or Travis Homer or whoever if he doesn't step up at this stage of the process and this time of year. Same thing at wide receiver for Tyler Scott. I don't think they're going to release a 4th-round rookie 2 years after drafting him. Same 4th round as Roschon Johnson. Like, at worst, Tyler Scott is a healthy scratch on game days this season. But the Bears added a ton. Well, not a ton, but added a lot of bodies, we'll say, at wide receiver with Luther Burden in the 2nd round and free agents like Olamide Zaccheaus and Devin Duvernay. Like Tyler Scott finds himself as wide receiver 6 right now on the Bears offensive depth chart, and that at its most generous, where it's like number 6 wide receiver has to play on special teams if you're going to be active at all on game day. And Devin Duvernay was brought in as a kickoff and punt returner. Now we've seen Tyler Scott be a kick returner as well, so he's got an opportunity to compete and try and stand out there. But he's also going to have to cover on those units and block on kickoff and punt units as well. Like he's got to be a 4-phase special teams player while also continuing to try and show more upside on offense, because we just haven't really seen a lot from Tyler Scott in 2 seasons, especially this past year. He kind of disappeared once Keenan Allen came in. He had 1 catch for 5 yards all of last season after having, 17 catches for just under 170 yards as a rookie. Wasn't anything crazy impressive, but it was at least a presence and a pulse, but almost non-existent in year 2. So Ryan Poles still mentioned him as somebody who's a key part of this wide receiving core, and that someone indicating that they have some real, faith and confidence in him, but he's got to step up or else he's going to be quickly buried behind Duvernay and Zaccheaus. And of course, like he's not going to get in the starting lineup with DJ Moore and Romadunze and Luther Burden. So he's just got to be potentially a top backup there. Another guy like facing this kind of hot seat of like disappearing and you're going to run out of playing time real quickly here is Zach Pickens on the defensive line. Another guy who's got to step up. It's been a disappointing 2 seasons for him as a 3rd-round pick. I've been consistently preaching on this podcast that defensive tackle in particular is a position that takes longer than other positions to transition to the NFL. That's a position where you have a lot more late bloomers, that it's not until years 3, 4, 5, even 6 before guys really get into their full stride as NFL players. And so you add in that Zach Pickens missed like the first, 6-ish games of last season with a groin injury. Like he was slow coming in and then was always trying to catch up the rest of the year. Like I'm not saying Zach Pickens is going to become anything special. I just think it's too early to completely give up on him just entering year 3, but the Bears are clearly preparing for the possibility that he never amounts to anything. That's why they signed Grady Jarrett. That's why they draft Shamar Turner. They still have Andrew Billings. They traded for Chris Williams last year from the Browns. Like, they have a lot of depth on this interior defensive line in particular. And it could be easy for Pickens to slowly fall farther and farther down. But hey, if he can stay healthy and he can start to take that kind of jump this season, I think there's an opportunity for Pickens to earn some playing time. But it's the difference between getting on the field and developing and being a healthy scratch this season, because who's going to be active on game day? Jarrett, Billings, Dexter, Turner, and then is Pickens number 5? Are you going to have 5 defensive tackles active on game day? Maybe Turner gets some rotational snaps at defensive end, so maybe then you keep an extra defensive lineman up and available. Or otherwise, you're waiting for an injury before you can get your playing time again, because otherwise you're just healthy scratch. So like, Pickens isn't going to get cut. Again, he's not in that category of player, but that 2023 class, those 3rd and 4th round picks here, they've got a lot of pressure, and OTAs, mandatory minicamp, is where they need to start stepping up, start reemerging, and proving to this new coaching staff why they were drafted as high as they were, and why they deserve to have playing time in 2025. One guy whose roster spot may legitimately be in doubt, in danger, up for grabs, is backup quarterback Tyson Bagent. We were going through this offseason fully expecting it was just going to be Williams and Bagent 1 and 2 moving forward, but Case Keenum comes in on a veteran, low-level veteran contract, and we kind of thought, okay, number 3 quarterback, essentially a de facto quarterback coach in the room. He's on the roster, but not really expecting him to play much. But all of a sudden, it's a real number 2 quarterback battle here between Bagent and Case Keenum, and all the pressure is on Bagent, because Keenum is kind of just, he is what he is at this. He's 37. He's towards the end of his career. He's been a capable, proven backup caliber quarterback in the NFL with some starting experience in his past. I think they have a real comfort with what Keenum might be able to offer them. But like Tyson Bagent, the upside is certainly there as a younger player, but also there's nothing guaranteed for him as a former undrafted rookie free agent. Because Caleb Williams was able to stay healthy all of last season, which was great. He only threw 2 passes, both completed for 11 yards, 1 for a first down, in 4 games last season. As a rookie, we would call him he played 4 games, went 2-2, and had almost 900 yards in those 4 games. Like, had some really impressive flashes, but then also kind of made some mistakes at the end there and looked like an undrafted rookie free agent playing in the NFL. So like, there's a lot to really like about Tyson Bagent, and presumably we hope Tyson Bagent should be good enough to beat Case Keenum to be the number 2 quarterback. Like, I have to imagine if the Bears are ever in a situation this season when a number 2 quarterback has to play in a game, I would rather have Bagent out there to see what he can do than roll with Case Keenum, who, in the last 4 years, Case Keenum has attempted, quick math in my head says, around 150 passes. I mean, he's had 4 starts in the last 4 years. He's had 2, 4, 6, 13 games in 4 years. Like, he has not really been a regular player as a backup quarterback the last few seasons. Like, this is not some like high-end backup that you're really excited, if he's in the game, we got a good chance when he's in the game. Like, I mean, maybe he's experienced, but like, there's nothing really exciting about Case Keenum as your backup quarterback. But Bagent, you feel like there's still more to uncover there. We know what Keenum is. We don't know fully what Bagent is. So I'd like to still see Bagent as the number 2 quarterback. You can keep Case Keenum on the roster as a number 3 if you'd like, but if Bagent doesn't step up and Keenum is that number 2 quarterback, I think they'd move on. They'd try and put him on the practice squad, but somebody might try and claim him. But I don't know that Bagent is so valuable that you keep him as a number 3 quarterback if there's other positions that you want to fill with more depth. I mean, maybe, but I think it's a borderline. I think it's questionable there as far as what the Bears would decide from a quarterback standpoint, because they were pretty comfortable rolling with 2 for last season, plus a 3rd on the practice squad. But they didn't need to have 3 deep there. Different coaching staff, obviously, but like, I just don't know that that's a priority for them if they can get if they think they could get Bagent on the practice squad there. I'm just quickly filibustering to look like the Detroit Lions were a 2 quarterback team as well, with Jared Goff and then Hendon Hooker as their backup last season. They haven't typically, they ended up getting Teddy Bridgewater at some point in that process, and they've had Teddy Bridgewater before, but for the most part, 2 quarterbacks. So it's Keenum versus Bagent for 1 spot at this point, most likely, and somebody's got to step up. And I think the pressure's on Bagent a lot more than it is on Case Keenum there. So we'll see how all these players do at mandatory minicamp. Obviously, we'll learn a lot more when it comes to training camp, and we'll keep tabs on them all along the way. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, don't forget to check out the Locked On NFL podcast, because I co-host Locked On NFL every Tuesday morning. This week, Kevin Ostreicher is filling in for Tyler Rowland, who's out on vacation, but we're talking all the biggest stories in the NFL with minicamps and OTAs rolling right now. So go check out Locked On NFL for your second listen today. Coming back tomorrow or on Thursday, and make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.